Hello, this is Barbara Parker Bell, art therapist and computer art therapy enthusiast. In 1999, I wrote one of the early articles about computers and art therapy titled Embracing the Future of Computers and Art Therapy. That is already 2 decades ago, and a lot has happened since that time. I'm grateful for the opportunity to review some of the accomplishments, conversations, and challenges that art therapists continue to face in terms of using digital technologies. I can't say that the early conversations were entirely positive in terms of embracing a future with computers and art therapy. People were concerned that computers were seductive machines that grabbed us away from traditional art-making processes and the environment, the natural environment, and our engagement with others. Does that conversation sound familiar? It was present at the very beginning of that time that computers became more available to everybody in the home in the 1990s. And the birth of the internet occurred. I recall going to a panel presentation where Edith Kramer presented, and I believe the title was about seduction and how computers were a part of that seduction away from our traditional artistic engagement. There were several reasons that art therapists were anxious about embracing a future with computers and art therapy. Beyond what I just stated in terms of kind of some hesitance or concern about computers taking people away from traditional artistic processes and true creativity, there was also concerns about mastery of the computer options. You have to remember that the 1990s was the beginning of the time when computers were more accessible, not accessible to everybody, but more accessible to people to have in the home and to work on. Still, there was a steep learning curve in terms of how to use the computer itself, to address new software, to wander around the netscape. The superhighway of the internet was all very new and slow and very different. You have to think about the 1990s as the horse and buggy days transitioning over to the automobile days in terms of the generation of art therapists exploring computers at that time. So to start, I'm going to revisit some of those horse and buggy days and some of the technology that existed at the very beginning of computer art therapy exploration. I'm also going to show you some of the software and tools that were available. The children's art therapy software or art software and art game software that became available, at least to me, made computers and art therapy more accessible and more possible. People were intimidated by some of the more advanced programs that were used by designers early on in terms of Photoshop and Illustrator. And there was lots of tools and things to learn to be able to manage them. But the early children's software, the early computers that made things friendlier, user-friendly, certainly provided that opportunity for us to leap forward in terms of using computers as a tool for art therapy practice. Here is an example of the early Apple computer, the iMac. For some of you, that looks like an ancient artifact. For some of us, it's familiar and still may look like an ancient artifact, but it was one of the early computers that became popular and was easy to keep in one's home, and it made it fun for families to work on their computers in the home and begin the adventure of using software and other kinds of practices on their computer right at home. Cezanne was one of many creative art software programs put out by museums to help engage young viewers in art museums and art practices. These are some of the tools that also inspired me with my children and with potential clients, as I believe these software games allow people to engage in art making and provide more access to amazing images in the home setting and provide a type of pre-art play for a real art therapy practice or with artwork. So it can be a warm-up pre-art play. This is one of the software programs that caught my attention in the 1990s. Masterpiece Mansion is another game that I really enjoyed. It's about getting lost in a mansion and having to use art clues that you observe to help you get out of these different rooms in the mansion. These types of games don't exist on CD-ROM anymore, but are available on the internet and may be used as pre-art play for art therapy processes, whether on the computer or with traditional art materials. KidPix was one of the first children's software programs that was available and easy to use. Again, I felt that KidPix and other types of software like it were easy to use and took some of the mystique out of computer software games. Although you might not want to use them with adults, it was a good kind of simple way to create things with stamps and words and drawing tools that allowed people to express themselves in a simple way. If you look carefully at this slide of kids' picks, you see the stamp tools and simple art tools, the color tools, the brush tools, the shading tools, the undo tools that were available with this type of program. One of the other important aspects of computer work is that it can make art making more accessible to those who do have dexterity or other physical challenges. This was an inspiration for me in terms of beginning to make that connection between computer processes and art therapy, in terms of witnessing a student who had suffered from a car accident. And the only way that this person could create art was through adaptive equipment and software programs. So we often worked with assistive technology people or occupational therapists to help find those adaptations, those tools that we could use with the computer to help people create. In this case of the student, this person introduced me to the software Flying Colors and again exposed me to different adaptive equipment that's available. Even more adaptive equipment and opportunities exist today, and that's another exciting aspect of utilizing computers in art therapy. Here you see a communication board, one of the many types of hardware available to art therapists to assist with communication and to support art making and technology. Here's Flying Colors, which is that software program that provided amazing collage type processes to create amazingly rich images. Here's some of the stamping tools that were available, and they were quite deluxe, various yet simple. Flying Colors software provided this very rich stamping collage-like environment with a lot of options available for people who use them. For example, you could change the size of the stamps, the location of the stamps. You had several different landscapes to choose from. You could make sounds to go with the different stamps as they occurred. And you could also print out the completed products to look at, just as we look at any other kinds of artwork in the art therapy process. One of the things that I really enjoyed about creating artwork within Flying Colors is that containment. As I said, you could create rich stories with Flying Colors, but it wasn't contained in this machine. There's something nice about that that's not so messy, and you can really reflect and get some distance from the ideas that you were expressing. However, I always felt that art could go back and forth between traditional art making processes and the computer. Again, I don't think Flying Colors really lent itself to that. However, there's other processes that we have and other kinds of hardware that help us go back and forth as artists, art therapists, and with our clients between art on computer and the art that we make. I'm going to talk to you about some of the hardware in terms of scanners and some of the software that we use to alter the work that we've created. Scanners are amazing. You can pull in your artwork and bring it into the computer for play with software, print it back out and create more things on it and send it back in, etc., etc. This is a contemporary scanner, which is my ideal, where really you could put a full-size artwork in through the scanner and take that in to do more work. However, scanners at the beginning of the time of art therapy practice were smaller and less adept. They were still valuable in helping people come to the exchange between traditional and non-traditional art processes. Now there are even more advanced tools that we could use in terms of tablets that serve as ways to kind of scan in our spontaneous drawing in the moment into the computer for software manipulation. There's amazing new opportunities for drawing and using computers. So you can see right now that an art therapist could be considering lots of equipment purchases for adaptation, for scanning, for computer, for printing, to make sure they had all the options available for the art therapy process. And that does cost money, and it may not be the kind of art making that a client could replicate at home if they can't afford all of those things as well. So there's the downside to the computer art process, and that one is expense and accessibility for our clients. Early on, with the use of scanners, clients and art therapists were able to help our clients utilize computers to do some alterations of family photographs and other artwork. What's amazing about scanning in on the psychological level is that you can preserve the original piece while making all sorts of changes, distortions, destruction, creations that enable emotional exploration, while preserving, again, that original product. You can also see the step-by-step process as each stage can be preserved. Kind of like taking pictures of the El Duende process of art creation step by step over a length of an experience. So the computer system can capture our process, which can be very valuable to art therapy. We use software to make the manipulations to the images, whether they be family images, landscape images, and phototherapy has utilized the computer to enhance photographs that we have taken either by traditional cameras or by digital cameras at this stage. We are also very spoiled in that we mostly take pictures with our cameras these days and can even manipulate those images right on our phones. Adobe Photoshop is one of the best known software programs that is quite complicated but can do amazing things to photographs. There are now simpler versions of photo altering software that are available for our clients and ourselves to use. And again, as I said, some of these manipulation tools are available on our phones as well. For better or worse, there's always new software. There's always new types of software to try, different versions of software to use. And that can be overwhelming at times if you're an art therapist. And of course, our clients may know about all these new softwares before we do and want to use them in practice. However, I am going to look at a few more types of software today, and one of the types relates to combining art making and words and comics into a cohesive artwork for our clients. And one of those software types is Comic Life. And I was fortunate enough to be able to observe an art therapist present on this in a conference, and then began to utilize it in private practice. Comic Life software became available in the 21st century, and I began using it in 2008. It provides different backdrops and different balloons that you can use where you can insert text. You can also place artwork or other imagery into the comic book kind of format and create a story or artifacts for your clients that they can use. The samples that you see here now were created by an art therapy group dealing with social anxiety. These were children dealing with social anxiety, and it was the Coping Captains group. As a part of the Coping Captains group, we created these comic books that reminded them of the skills that they were using to fight back their fears, including breathing and thinking super thoughts. And again, these not only were created with the children in sessions, they became a part of their homework for therapy. Of course, there are other comic software available, or should I say today, apps that you can use with your clients to help them provide contained windows of art therapy space in the digital format. As you might have noticed from the samples that I provided from the Coping Captains group, we were able to bring in drawings that they created, take photos of them in costume. You can incorporate all kinds of things and sayings in a single space. My example of the Coping Captains group and its use of the Comic Life software is just but one example of how art therapists are adapting specific software to specific treatment plans for our clients. It can vary in terms of what comes first for the art therapist. Is it the need of the client that generates interest in a software or hardware opportunity? Is it the hardware or software capabilities that excite them and they think about applying that to a population? I believe both occur, and curiosity is required and time is required to be able to explore the digital media and to match that to the client's needs. In spite of potential challenges, art therapists continue to innovate, and I've been impressed with some of the applications of animation, both two-dimensional and stopgap animation using computers as interventions for adolescents, intellectually disabled, and those with dementia. Additionally, there's amazing use of iPads and iPad apps that are endless. And they've been utilized in medical settings where sanitary requirements are paramount. I have to admit, even for a computer art therapy enthusiast like myself, it can get a bit overwhelming to try to keep up with all the changes and all the software and all the equipment and all the apps that are available for our use. I have to confess that I take technology vacations and stay away from it for a while as not to be overwhelmed. Still, I find myself pulled back into experimenting with computers and art therapy as I'm curious and I want to know how these different art processes that my clients are familiar with will help them in their pathways in creating a good life. One of the things that drew me back into art therapy and computer technology after my last vacation was considering the art of blogging and how that may be applied to therapeutic art settings. So many people find blogging attractive, and there's been several articles about how the blog has become similar to the journal, except that it's accessible online. There are pros and cons to journaling online, and some of that relates to privacy settings and people's awareness of privacy settings and access that may be available to others that were not intended to be witnesses. My personal blog experience occurred when I completed my Fulbright experience in the Russian Federation. During this time, I kept a written and visual blog about my journey. I found it a tremendously helpful experience to take pictures, reflect in writing, package it neatly in a way that I can put out in public and have that witnessed by others. Upon return from the Russian Federation, I delved into the therapeutic processes of the blog and considerations, and there's a lot of interesting dynamics in terms of what we may select in terms of expectations from our audience in terms of providing us feedback. All of these subtle nuances are important things for art therapists to know if they're going to counsel their clients on whether or not to undertake a creative art therapy blog. There's amazing benefits, but there could also be tremendous costs if people get unexpected attention from their blog postings. One of the themes and of the conversations that art therapists have about computer technology is training and support for art therapist assimilation of all these new ideas and applications. And the question is, are art therapy schools training people for these diverse applications and programs? Personally, I've had to train myself on all of these applications. I get help from peers, I get help from YouTube. Now again, that's a great resource for us because they can have a real person showing us some steps on how to do things. For example, this is actually my first iMovie, so I thank you for your patience. This training issue, again, becomes one of the challenges that we face as art therapists in terms of keeping up our skills and devoting time to the practice. It may help to specialize in some areas, to stick with software programs that work or technology that works, and get a lot of support from other art therapists who are exploring technology. To end this video presentation, I'm going to show you some images of the camera transformed into phone, transformed into computer, where we do a lot of our expressive creative work during these days. I wish you the very best for embracing a future with computers and art therapy, and I hope that the next 20 years is just as exciting. Thank you for having me here. I look forward to further dialogues in the 20 years ahead.